Hey, welcome to an ASP.NET crash course. In this video, in about an hour, we're going to build a complete website that has a database application written in the C# language. Hi, my name's Shad, and I'm working today with Gwen to bring you a .NET tutorial on her channel. We're collaborating, so if you want to come to my channel and see her do a Vue tutorial, that would be her expertise, and I'm going to show you what I've been working on recently. So .NET is a framework that is built by Microsoft to create full-stack websites. Let's get going. So here's what the application is going to look like. We're going to build a jokes app, and this will allow you to enter in jokes and their answers so that you can keep a record of all your best humor. This application is a basic CRUD application. So CRUD refers to create, read, update, and delete from a database. So we'll create all the forms, the website, and the database that makes it all happen. In the database, we'll be able to search for the jokes that we create, and we'll see the tables and all of the forms that go with them. Let's talk about this course and see what's in it for you. We'll talk about what is ASP.NET Core. We're going to talk about what MVC means, the Model View Controller Design Pattern. We'll set up a database. We'll do registration, login, and page security, and then do some database querying. So all of these things are what's ahead. So what is ASP.NET Core, and why would you want to use it? Well, Microsoft developed C# and this framework to build web applications. And so if you want to build a website with a database, then this is a good tool to use. There are competitors out there, of course. You can build framework applications in Java using Spring, PHP, Laravel, Python, the language Python with Flask. You could work with JavaScript with Node.js and Express. So all of these are similar solutions, and this is a popular one. ASP.NET will get you a real job at corporations that create enterprise-level applications. Many students that I've taught before have well-paying jobs in large companies using this exact technology. .NET is Microsoft's solution to develop software of all kinds since about 2001. It's very similar to what you would know if you work with Java and the Java virtual machine. It's a runtime environment that you can create applications for on multiple platforms. ASP stands for Active Server Pages. It's kind of a leftover term from earlier technologies in the early 2000s, but they still keep ASP in the name. The word core is somewhat new to Microsoft. Core is the open source version of their web development kit. It's cross-platform. You can run your applications now on any server, whether it's Linux. You can write your applications in Linux or Mac or Windows. So Core is Microsoft's open source cross-platform solution to developing software. .NET is their unified platform to build almost anything in software land. Desktop applications, web applications, hosting on the cloud, creating apps in mobile, gaming, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. Microsoft is a very powerful player in software development, and .NET is their solution. So in this course, we're going to focus on ASP.NET, which is used for building web applications. How does C# fit into this? Well, .NET is not the language that we're talking about. C# is one language that is used in this platform. So the .NET framework consists of a runtime engine and libraries for executing programs in a compliant language. So C# is one language. It is by far the most popular language, but you could write it in other things as well. But we're going to use C# because that is Microsoft's premier tool and their language of preference for this kind of work. So why do we need ASP.NET, and why did Microsoft invent it? Well, about 1997, there was this change from desktop-centric computing to web-centric computing. So Microsoft was firmly in control with their WinForms and clients on their PCs, and then the internet happened. And so we went from building form-based applications to web-based applications, and ASP was their solution. So .NET is very similar to Java in many ways. As you might know, Java was written as a language that could be written on one platform and executed on any platform. And so they had a Java virtual machine. Well, Microsoft created .NET pretty much in answer to that. So ASP was somewhat similar to what you would see today in PHP. It's a language that runs a dynamic website. The .NET part is similar to Java, that it's compiled on one platform and can run on many platforms. So you combine the two, and you have an active server pages and .NET as the compiled environment. And so ASP.NET is their answer to making web pages on a web server. So here's what an ASP page looks like. You can see that there's some code here that is a mixture of HTML and something that looks like C#. And so we would call this Razor. This is their markup language that is able to create something that is dynamic. So every time you click on an item in a web page, you get a custom version just for that user. So probably hooking up to a database and showing information in a dynamic option. So this platform is a end-to-end solution. It runs the back end and the front end. And so we'll call it a full stack environment. So you have a database management system, you have business logic in the middle, and the front end with HTML. It also can be combined with popular front-end services. So if you're into JavaScript programming, such as React, Angular, or Vue, or mobile applications, that could be your front end, and you could learn your ASP.NET tools to manage the database in the back end. So it's your choice. You can choose the front end and the back end. You can use them all together or separately. So it's a very flexible programming environment. Let's go ahead and start building an application in ASP.NET Core. All right, well, let's get started on the next section in our course outline. We're going to focus on this line here called Model Views and Controllers, or MVC. And so we'll actually build an application that you can test out. What you see in front of you is the finished application. It's called the Jokes app. Let's go ahead and look at some of the features. So first of all, I click the link called Jokes, and you can see that all the jokes that I've put into my database appear. Let's try the first one. Why did the chicken cross the road? Let's click the details link, and of course the answer is to get to the other side. If we want to change this, we can click the Edit button, and then we're asked to log in. So I put in my username and password. I can log in. So instead of cross the road, let's try the word playground. Have you heard this one? Why did the chicken cross the playground? Well, the answer is to get to the other slide instead of side. Let's save that. And now you can see the results should show up in the list. So now you can see the question is now, why did the chicken cross the playground? So if you wanted to see the answer, you could click Details, or if you wanted to delete or edit it, you could do that. Let's try the search function. And so if I wanted to put in a joke here about jump, let's see if we get anything. Search comes up. So now you can see one joke in the search results. Can a kangaroo jump higher than the Empire State Building? Wait for it. The answer is, of course, the Empire State Building can't jump. Let's go ahead and back to the list. And that one's so bad, I'm going to just delete it right now. And yes, it is gone. All right, so that's the application we're going to build. Let's get started with a new project, and I'll show you how to create these forms in an automatic fashion. So you have to have your computer set up to work properly to run this stuff. I'm using Visual Studio on a Windows 10 computer. Now there are other ways that you can set this up, but this is by far the simplest. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project and choose from the list. So there are lots of things that you can develop with Visual Studio. I'm going to select some things like C#, all platforms such as Windows, and I'm going to choose Web as my choice. That narrows down some of the things that I can build. The item that I'm searching for is called ASP.NET Core Web Application. And as you can see, there are dozens of different types of projects that you can build. And so what you're learning here is just a crash course of what Visual Studio can do. But let's get started with this version right here and choose Next. So I'm going to name mine as Jokes Web App. You can see the location is set to a directory on my hard drive. You can change this if you want or leave it as the default and click Create. Once you choose the web application, you can see there are many different choices on how you're going to build it. So I'm going to select the traditional right here. It's called Web Application Model View Controller. And that is the full stack solution. You can see there are other options, such as if you want to use Angular or React for your front end. And if you want to choose an empty thing that you can just build from scratch, you can choose that. I'm choosing this one here because a lot of code is automatically generated for me. It's the fastest way to get started. Now over here, I'm going to change the authentication option. Right now, there is no authentication, which means there are no databases, no user accounts. I'm going to switch that because I want the computer to generate as much as it can for me, and so that I can get started quickly. Now, I'm going to also select individual user accounts. So that will create the database and it will set up tables for me. Now, if you work with an enterprise authentication system, you might want to select one of these other ones, but the individual accounts is very, very common. Let's go ahead and choose OK. Now, you should see that this option is checked. We have configured like this on the other side, and let's go ahead and choose Create Now. Now, what we're creating is a predefined system that's going to have a lot of code generated for us. So let's take a look around and see what ASP.NET generated for us. First of all, if you're familiar with Visual Studio, this will be similar to projects that you've done before. We have a Solution Explorer. It shows us all of the code that's been generated for us. And don't worry, we're going to look in each of these folders as we go through the tutorial, and you'll learn what they do. You can see on the other side here, we have a SQL Server Object Explorer, and it says we have a SQL Server up and running. So that's all built into Visual Studio when you get started. Now, if you don't see any of these things, you can go to the View menu, and you can find all of these things on the choices here. So you can show them or hide them under the View menu. At the center, you can see that there's a welcome page, and the .NET Core documentation is something we're going to be looking at, so this will bring you to Microsoft's official website. If you're done with your application, you can connect it and host this application on Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud platform. We're not going to get to that, but if you wanted to, you could extend your application to run online. Ours is going to be a local solution, so we will be serving it on a local host or a local web server, which will only be used by you, the programmer, for right now. I'm going to close this, and then I'm just going to start by clicking the green button that says IIS Express. That stands for Information Internet Server. It's Microsoft's web server. And it will automatically launch and compile everything that we see in the Solution Explorer. So you can see that my application already launched. A web browser pops up. I'm using Chrome as my default browser, and so that's why you see Chrome here. And you can see the web service is now starting at localhost. So there's a web server installed on this Windows machine, and it tells me I'm running on this port number, and then I have Jokes web app open. So there are two pages that are automatically designed for you, the home page and the privacy page. There's a registration and login page that is already set up for you. Now, we're going to close the app because it really doesn't do much more than show two pages. Let's look around and see where those things are coming from. So let's look in the folders here on the Jokes web app solution. So we have important parts here called controllers and views. Now, if you look inside of the home view, you're going to see an index page. Let's open that. And you can see that we have the welcome message that appears on our website. Let's look at privacy, and you can see that there is another web page. So the views area is probably the easiest to understand for a new programmer. These are HTML pages. However, they are labeled as CS HTML. So that is C# HTML. It's the combination of two languages blended into one page. Let's start off by modifying the privacy page. So it says, use this page to detail your site's privacy. Let's also modify the index page here, which is the welcome screen. So I'm going to modify the H1 tag, which is the big welcome sign. And then inside the paragraph tag, I'm going to change the sentence to something that makes sense for my application. So let's see if those two changes will occur on our website. So I click the green arrow for Run, and you should see new pages appear. So you can see the new page shows up, the Jokes application, and I click Privacy, and I get the next message that I just created. So that's what a view is. It's a website, and it's the HTML code that you can modify. So now we're going to get into this concept of MVC, Models, Views, and Controllers. We've just looked at what a view is. A view is a web page using HTML, or in this syntax, we're going to call it Razor. We're going to next look at what a model is, and what a controller is, and how they run. So MVC is really a design pattern. It's not a language. The point here is to create applications that have separations of concerns. That means your file sizes are smaller, your code is modular, and it can be run and managed by multiple people. So there are three parts to an MVC. First of all, there's a model. That's a class. And so we'll be creating a model for our joke. A joke will have a question, an answer, and an ID number. We're also going to create views. We just looked at what a view is. It's a web page. And then the most important part, perhaps, is the central controller. So the controller handles the logic of the computer code. It tells the pages when to appear. It gives them data that they can show. And so that's what a model view controller is. Let's talk about what a website looks like using this system. So the user, first of all, has a request. It says, give me all the orders of today's date. And the system that you see here, this ASP.NET, would interpret that through a router. So a router would look at the URL and say, hey, today we're going to look at our date and we are looking for the orders. It would send this information then to the controller of your program. The controller says, hey, I'm going to see that you're looking at the route called orders, and it has a specific URL. Well, then it says, I'm going to create a list of all the orders. And so it would have a C# language that says, let's create a list, and let's go to the store and get the orders for today. Well, that would have to hit the database. And so we're going to see SQL statements then that says, hey, let's get all of the orders where the date equals today. It will return that to the model. The model will send it to the controller. The controller now has a list of data. What's the controller going to do with that data? Well, it's going to then send it off to a view and to say, hey, show me the showorders.html page, and here is a list of data that goes with it. Well, then it's going to generate a list that is going to be an HTML format and send it to the browser. And so when it gets back to the user, you have a fully formed web page. So all of these things in the background are called, every time you click something on a website, generating a dynamically produced page that would show you today's orders. So let's return into our program and see where those things are. So we've already looked at views. Let's look at the controller next. So if I go into controllers, there's a page called Home Controller. You can see that there are functions in this controller that says things like index. So index says, return me a view. And there's nothing in here to tell us which view it is. And so the index page is assumed here. Scrolling down a little bit further, we come to another event called privacy. So if the controller says the person clicked on the privacy link, send them the link called view, which is also privacy. Here is another event called error, and if the error occurs, that means the user clicked on some link that doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and start creating some views, and we'll see how this controller then is able to work. Hi, in this section of the tutorial, we're going to create some views. So remember that a view is a piece of HTML code or something similar. It usually gets its information from a list of data from the controller. We're going to dynamically create this page in using C# and the HTML language. That language we're going to call Razor. The other part of the page is going to be a model. And so we're going to be creating a model for our joke. A model is always data related. It consists of classes or objects with properties. The model will usually be supplied by the controller and sent to the view with a list of objects. And so let's see what that looks like in code. So returning again to our project here, let's open the project called Models. Now there is something called an error view model, but we're not going to look at that because I just want to start with the simplest model we can. So let's do a right click on this folder and let's choose Add, and I'm going down to the option called Class. So inside the model folder, add class. Now I'm going to remain selected with the item called class, and then for the name I'm going to call it joke. So a joke is the class, and it's going to be the central part of our application. Go ahead and click Add. So this is the object-oriented part of the code. So a class or an object is going to have properties. Now in C# you can create a property with this shortcut, prop, press the tab key twice, and you will get a piece of code that's automatically generated. So the class is going to be, this property is going to have a public accessibility, and the integer is the data type. I'm going to press tab one more, and I'm going to use ID as the property number. In C#, for a getter and setter, you just put in the parentheses here and the word get and set. So that is the default type of project property. For our joke, let's create two more items. I'm going to have a joke question and a joke answer. So this is a very simple version of a class or an object. Let's save it, and now we're going to create some things to go with it. The last property that I'm going to create is actually a method. It's going to be a constructor. So there's a shortcut in C# where you can type in CTOR, type tab tab, and it will automatically generate the function called the constructor. Now for right now, I'm just going to leave the constructor empty because it's going to be used by other pieces of the code, and it needs to be empty like this. The next thing we're going to do is create some pages dynamically. The system's going to generate them for us. But we need to know that there is a file here that was already in the system. It's called the application DB context. So you don't have to worry about what is in it for right now, but you do need to know it's there because it's going to ask for this in just a moment. The next step is going to generate a lot of code for us. Let's right-click on the controllers area, choose Add and Controller. Now the controller is going to be the heart of this thing, but it's going to create a lot of other pieces as well. So we need to select the right kind of controller. So I'm going to choose the third one down, I think it is, that has all of the options, such as we're going to create all of the things to do create, add, delete, and edit. Then we're going to select the model. The model that we're choosing is this jokes class. And so it'll create these pages based on the properties of our joke. The other part that I warned you about, it's going to ask you for this application DB context. We'll get to what that is in a minute, but we just need to supply it here. Make sure that your check marks at the bottom match mine. That will generate the HTML code as a partial page so that it'll fit into the website very nicely. Finally, click the Create button. Now this is going to take a while. You'll see things that will install automatically, and if all goes well, we will see several new pages that will be shown on our website automatically. Okay, finally this is done. It took me several minutes for the generation to occur. But we now have this jokes controller here. And we should also see that in the views folder, we have a new folder called jokes. And so you can see that there are 5 new web pages that were created. There is create, delete, details, edit, and index. So hours of programming have just been done for you with a single click of the mouse. Now we're interested to see if this works, so let's go ahead and run the application. Well, it looks like the application's up and running. We still have home and privacy as our 2 links, but what about the jokes controller? We just created it. Well, you can see that the URL is about home right now. Well, that's the home controller that's in action. So let's delete the home privacy part and just type in the word jokes. What do we get? We should see a new page that shows all of the jokes in our database. Well, we have a problem because we don't have a database yet. So it says the database operation failed, and so we have some work to do with the database, but the pages should be there. So in the next section of the tutorial, we're going to create the database so that those jokes pages will come to life. In this section of the tutorial, we're going to take our model that we've built, and we're actually going to create the database that goes behind it. And so we'll use something called migrations to create our tables. Let's look at our project to see a new section that we haven't done anything with yet. There's a folder called data, and you can see that there is another folder called migrations in here. Let's go see what this is all about. So if I click on here, you're going to see some code that is about databases. You can see that we're generating a table called ASP.NET roles. You can see that there's going to be another table called users. There's also a class in our project called joke, and I don't see anything about jokes tables, so we're going to fix that right now. Now down at the bottom of the screen here, there is an area that is called the output, and I'm going to switch to the Package Manager console. Now the goal of the Package Manager console is usually to install new dependencies. However, we're going to use it for some database management. So in this console, I'm going to attempt to type enable-migrations. And you can see that there's a message that says, hey, you're looking at an older version of this. So old guys have to learn new tricks. We're going to now type in the word add migration. So add-migration, and then we have to give it a name. And so the first migration is the initial setup of our database. So that's what I'll call it. You can name it any string you want, but it has to be something descriptive. Okay, so something happens after I type this in. Let's see what the computer generated. Back into the migrations folder, you'll see a new file called initial setup, exactly named as what I just created. Let's see what's inside here. So there is a command called create table joke, and let's see what else there is. It looks to me like that's the only item. So we're going to create a new table. You can see that the joke is supposed to have a joke question and a joke answer. So what we've just started is something called an object relation mapper. You can see that the mapping here is between a class and a table. So in this example, the class on the right is a person. It has an ID, name, phone, and age for properties. And the ORM is creating a table for us, which is going to match exactly to that class. An ORM then is an object relation mapper. Now there are two options for creating databases with a system like this. The Object Relational Mapper, ORM, is a popular tool, but it's not the only way to do it. The more traditional way is called a DAO, where you create your tables manually, and then you are more traditionally managing your database access. You write your own SQL statements with this. And here's the catch, that most people that manage databases, like the DBAs in your company, they usually prefer the old-fashioned method. The reason why is because they can get more visibility on what's happening in the database, not so automated. However, the ORMs, on the other hand, are sometimes preferred by programmers that are trying to save some time. It allows the computers to generate data tables without you having to actually write any SQL statements. So an ORM has been called a way for people to write SQL statements without writing SQL statements. It's a shortcut. You can use your database tools to be updated using what's called migrations, which is where we're in the process right now of coding. So Entity is the name of the ORM that we're using right now. It's Microsoft's ORM. ORMs are very good for simple applications, such as our Jokes app. However, another version of this tutorial should include how to make DAOs, or data access objects, because a lot of companies would prefer you to use that kind of a system when you build your app. So now let's return to Visual Studio, and maybe we can understand what this is doing now. So this folder called Migrations is the language of creating tables. Now all we have to do to make this happen is type in the word update-database, and I'll press enter. And I'll let the ORM do the magic of creating all the tables for us. So it's going to create two tables. One is for the user accounts. The second is for our jokes. It'll probably have more tables than that, but that's the basic idea. Okay, I see a message that says done. Let's go look in our folders to see what happened. So I'm going over to the left side that says the SQL Object Explorer. If you can't see that, you can go to the View menu and get it. Now I'm going to open up the SQL Server, and it has two different projects here, two different databases. Let's see what they are. I'm going to open the first one, and I search for databases, and it looks to me like we have several of them. So I'm going to choose the Jokes web app is what I'm interested in. Let's go open that up, and then finally tables. So inside the tables area, you can see that there are several tables that are all about users and then one about jokes. Well, I think we can understand the one about jokes the best, so let's double-click joke and see what it looks like. So as I open up the definition, you can see that the table has been created according to the properties of my joke. So it has ID, joke question, and joke answer, integer, string, and all of that was created for me without me knowing anything about SQL. So the application is apparently got a database. Let's see if it'll work now. So I'm going to push the green arrow again to run the application. All right, so we got the app up and running, and if I click on one of these things, you can see it'll still work on these pages. Now, we don't have any links that are automatically taking us to the jokes controller, so I'll have to type in jokes as my URL and press enter. Now, earlier we had a message that says your database was not configured. However, now we have an index page. So this shows me all of the jokes that are in my database. Obviously, I don't have any yet, so let's click the Create New button, and it says, make me a new joke. Well, let's see. It looks to me like I've put some in before, so let's try why the chicken crossed the road. And the answer is to get to the other side. So those are typed in. Let's click the Create button. And now we've got ourselves an index page. So do we want to delete the joke, edit, or show the details? We can do all of those things. So each one of these pages has already been created for us automatically. The database is in the background. So you could say, hey, we're done with our jokes app. Not so fast. There's a bunch of more features that we're going to add. But you have reached the point where you have a functioning application that you created with just a few mouse clicks. Now, some of the features that I'd like to add, such as details, I would like to show who the owner was. We're going to log in and register and link those together. We're also going to not give away the answers. So right now, we've got the joke question here and the joke answer on the same page. That's kind of a giveaway. So we'll fix that. We're also going to limit the access. So if I click the Create button and I'm not logged in, it will not allow me to click a Create button. So those are some of the things that we're going to improve in the next few videos. Hey, so now let's take a look toward the end of the course here. What I have on the screen is a finished product of all the features that we're going to add. So you can see that I've created a couple of menu items up here. First of all, the jokes choice. So now we see a list of all the jokes that are in the database. Also, we have a search function. So if we want to find something, such as the word jump and search, we would find an answer. It looks like I don't have that jokes question anymore. Also, if I try the Create New button, you can see that now we are forced to log in. So no anonymous jokes are allowed here. If I choose log in, then I can add a new joke, and you can see it's associated with a user ID when I create it. Okay, back to our current progress here. I've kind of rewound now my application to where we left off just a minute ago. The first thing I want to do is add the link at the top of our menu. So we want to show the jokes list as an item that we can click on. To do that, we need to go into this folder here inside of Views called Shared, and then we have an item called Layout. Let's go check that out and see what's in there. So as you look through the layout code, you'll see that it looks like a bunch of HTML. Now, this item here is the nav bar. That's what we're going to add an item to. Now, if you were to know Bootstrap, then you're all set to go because Bootstrap classes are what you see all the way through here. So this is CSS programming. If you haven't done a tutorial on that, probably this is going to look strange. But anyway, let's take a look at the code right here in this section. So this is one of the items in the nav bar. You can see that it is the privacy link, and there's another link above it called the home link. So we don't have to understand all of the classes and all of the items in here, but we can just modify one. So I'm going to copy this and then press enter and paste. So now I have 3 links, and the link called privacy is duplicated. So let's see if we can modify this to work correctly. So first of all, a link has an A tag, and the item in between is the text. So let's just put in jokes. Now, the other item here are some of these ASP tags. So it says ASP controller. So the controller name. Well, the home controller is what the first 2 links are. We created a jokes controller earlier. So let's type in the word jokes. And then it says, what's the action? The action on this guy is index. Now, how did I know how to do those things? Let's go look at the controller and see where that information comes from. So I scroll to the top of the screen and I find the jokes controller. So we'll look at this and then come back to our nav bar in a second. So the jokes controller. The jokes controller is going to have a few methods in it. First of all, the index method here is the item that is going to show all jokes. And you can see that it is already got some code inside here. So this is database code that was created using the entity framework. So let's go back to our code here in the layout. So what did I put in here? I put in the word jokes. Why didn't I put the whole word jokes controller? Well, the word controller is assumed. So if you type in jokes controller, that would probably make more sense, at least in my mind, but that's not the way that Microsoft designed it. So jokes is the only thing we need to put. Then the index is the action. So let's save this and run it and test it out. Okay, it looks like the app is up and running, and you can see that in the menu we have now a jokes item. So if I click here, we should bring up the jokes list. And sure enough, there it is. So this is the index page for the jokes controller. And if we want, we can go to the other items from here. So now instead of having to learn how to type in the URL up there with the jokes, we have a link to it in our nav bar. So there's one nice feature done. Let's now add the search function, and then we'll add the new list in our page. All right, so here's the next item. So I'm going to copy and paste another link. So let's change the text here to the word search. And I'm going to then change the action to something else. So we're still in the jokes controller, but now the action, I'm going to call it show search form. How about? And that doesn't exist yet in the controller, so we need to go fix that. Just to show you how this works, let's run it and see what happens. So the app is up and running. We can go ahead and look at the jokes list, and we should see the one item in our search. Now let's click the search item, and you can see that we have a not found error. So the jokes method called show search form does not yet exist. The jokes controller does. So we need to create this method and then make it search for our jokes. So where are we going to put that method? Well, it has to be in the jokes controller. So let's double click on jokes controller and take a look at our index. This is our model that we're going to copy and paste. So I'm going to copy our index page and paste it. And let's do this. Let's do show search form. So that's just in the comments that says if somebody types in this URL, this is the command that's going to happen. Now the key difference here that instead of the index method, we're going to type in show search form. Now all this is going to do is show a form, and then we'll have to put in some information there. So now we're ready for the next part. It says return a view. Now I'm not going to send this view any information, so it's just an empty view. Now you have two options here. Now inside these parentheses, we could put in this string called show search form. That would mean go find the form with that name. But since the method name up here is already that title, we can just have nothing in the view item. So that is an optional parameter. All right, so does that solve our problem? I doubt it, but let's run the application and see what happens. So we're going to get a different error this time. When I click search, we're going to have a problem now that says no longer is it not found, but we have a different problem. It says here the view show search form was not found. So we did get to the controller, and it says, hey, you wanted to show this form. There is no form yet by that name. So it says, I tried to look in all of these folders and didn't find it anywhere. So obviously we haven't created it yet, so that's why we have this error. So I ran it here just to show you that this is a common thing if you're building an app and you forget to put in a piece. Okay, so how are we going to create this new form? Well, we could go down to the views folder and create a folder or create an item called show search form. That would work. So since I'm lazy, I'm going to let the computer do some of the coding for me. So I'm going to right click on show search form, and the first item that comes up is add view. Well, that sounds handy. Let's try that. Then the next screen asks a question, what kind of view do you want? Do you want an empty one, or do you want to take one that's pre-programmed? Well, I like the pre-programmed idea because it will make a lot of code for us. So what's the form name? Well, they already provided it as a suggestion, show search form. That sounds like it. Now, there's a template. It says, what kind of template do you want? So we could have a template that says, do you want to create something, delete an item, show the details, edit, empty, or show a list? Well, we just wanted a data input form, somewhere where we can put in a search term and then click the button. So the closest one to that is create. So even though we're not creating an item, we are creating a data entry form. So I'm choosing create. Now what are we going to create? Well, I want to show the joke model here as my basis for creating an item. I'm going to check partial view because I want it to be part of the main template, and then click add. Now isn't that nice? We just generated an entire data input form, and it's based on the joke answer and joke question. So we could probably run the app now and get something. All right, so we got the app up and running. Let's try the search button and hopefully get something. There it is. We have the create form here. So we have ID, joke question, joke answer as the input form. That's not exactly the way I want it, but at least we have a form that is up and running. Now we're going to go back and modify several things here. So I only want one box for my data entry, so I can knock out the first two items that are form groups, where it says we have an input and a label and a span. So let's just take those and delete them. So now we just have something called joke answer, and then we have a submit button. The submit button says create, so I'm just going to change that right now to the word search, and I'm going to change a few of these items. So actually I don't care about jokes at all. I just use this as a template, so I'm going to knock out this item on number 1 called model, because we are not creating a new joke. We are just having a data entry form. So that goes out, and then for the title I'm going to say search for a joke. At the bottom here's some more code that is for data validation to see if you typed in the joke in the correct format. Well, that's no longer needed either, so that goes away. So as soon as we take out the line for model, you can see we start getting errors in the center of our form that says, hey, you wanted to associate this input with a joke answer. I have no idea what a joke answer is anymore because that line on the top of the form told me that the model on this page was a joke, and there's no jokes anymore. Now I'm going to modify the two lines that are input and label. So no longer are we going to worry about the joke model. So we're just going to say that this input has a name. So the name of this input is called search phrase. See how we're modifying an existing form and modifying it to a regular HTML form. The label then has to match it as well, so the label is for the search phrase. Now there's also a line here that says validation, which we don't have to worry about, so that goes away. Looks like here's a line about validation as well, so we're knocking that out. Okay, our form is getting really simple now. Now there is one item here that makes something completely wrong. It says the form action. The form action right now is to show the search form. Well, we don't want the search form to show itself. We want it to go to another item. So now I'm going to refer to another method that doesn't exist yet, and we're going to call it show search results. So show the form brings us to this form. When we enter an item into the form, we should show the results as the next step. So that's why I called that thing the ASP action. All right, it's time to test it out. Let's run it and see what it looks like. All right, the app is up and running. Let's click the search button, and we have a simple form now. It says search for a joke. So let's search for a joke, and let's look for chicken and choose search. Now, we have another issue that says show search results doesn't exist. So guess what we're going to have to do next? We're going to have to go into the controller and create that method. So we're looking for the jokes controller and then the method called show search results. That's the pattern that we're following here. So let's create that next. So to make this method occur, we have to go find the controller. So we come up here to the top, and I'm going to open up the jokes controller again. So we did show search form as our last guy. Let's take a copy and paste on this, and we're going to use him as a model. Now this is going to be using a post submit method, and then this is called show search results. So this is just comments to let me know what I'm supposed to be making. So show search results is my method. Now the data input form that we put together just a second ago has some values that we want to receive here. So string, I think it was called search term, and that should come directly from the form. Now I'm going to verify that I spelled that right. So I'm going to go back to the form here and check it out. So it was called search phrase. I think I spelled that wrong. So let's copy this and come back into the jokes controller, And instead of search term, we make sure that it matches with search phrase. Okay, so that's a common mistake that I make, is I don't match up the input values that come from our forms, and that just causes all kinds of problems when you run the app. So at this point, it should capture the search phrase, and then we're going to have to create another view. Now I want to test this out, and I'm going to change a few things around here so that it'll just print a message to the screen without trying to create an entire form. So what I'd like to try next is, instead of returning an entire view, like an entire web page, I'm just going to return a string. So let's erase this part and say you entered, and then the search phrase is what we're going to put in there. So it's just going to echo it back to the user. Now, as soon as I do that, you see you have a red line that says you're trying to convert a string, which is what I just typed, into something called an I-action result. Now, up until this time, we've just been glossing over this section here. So this method returns an item called task, an I-action result. So there's a whole bunch of things that can be returned when you create these views. Up until now, we've just created HTML pages to show to the screen. In more advanced versions of this application, we could create a REST API, a service that would create JSON data, and that would be also one of these I-action results. But for right now, I'm just trying to return a string for testing purposes, so I'm going to knock out all of this stuff here and just type in the word string. So that's the data type that should be returned, and that's what I returned just below here. So this is just for testing purposes. As you'll see, it's just a very simple message. Okay, let's see what it looks like. Let's run the app. We'll do a search, and I'm going to type in something here. Let's try chicken again and search. And now I get the message, a string only, that says you entered chicken. So obviously strings are returnable and they can be displayed in a browser, but that's not really very pretty. But it does tell me this one thing, that the form data was entered and received by the controller and then sent to the next item on the page. So I must have spelled all the things correctly in my form. Okay, so I stopped the program and I return back to here. So I'm going to press Control-Z to undo this first item, Control-Z to enter back to where I was before. Let's see, I don't want that one, I want search phrase. Okay, so I want to get back to the stage where I was before. So now, instead of doing a view for just a string, I want to return a list of filtered results. Now, if I wanted to return the entire list, I have a pattern of code that I could use for that. That was the original index method. So I'm going up to copy the entire list and put it into my search results. So this is not really good search results. It shows every joke in my database. But we can modify this in just a jiffy here. So the await command says that we're going to do some asynchronous programming. And then the view says we're going to show something called search results. That won't work. We need to tell it a different view. So you can put in an optional parameter at the beginning and tell it, we're looking for the index view and the following data to go with it. So let's see if that does anything. Let's run it. Okay, here we are yet again. Let's run the app. Let's do search, and let's search for a joke. So if I typed in chicken and search, I should get just chicken, right? So anything with chicken in it. Let's see if it works. So it appears that I get search results. I got an answer that says chicken. Let's go back and search for something else. Is there any joke with the word frog in it? Let's try that. Search. And I got the same exact results. That means that every item in my database is being shown. Well, I only have one item, but anyway, frog is not here. So I have a list that is returned, but I need to filter that list so that I could only show chicken or frog as a keyword. So to turn this into a search function, we're going to go to this item where it has the context.joke and the place where we're getting our data. So we're inserting the word where. So this is like a SQL filter, where you can specify a condition about how you want to select items. So the where is going to be a parentheses. Now inside the parentheses, we are going to use an anonymous functions or an arrow function. So that's a whole subject in itself of how these work. So don't have time here in a crash course to look at it, but if you want to look for arrow functions or anonymous functions, this will give you the idea. But you can see what's happening. It says here, for every J that has a joke question that contains the search phrase, such as frog, we will put it in the list. So obviously we don't want frog to be our search all the time, so I'm going to change that to the word search phrase. And so this will filter the list and limit it to only the items that contain the search term. So let's test it out. Let's run the app and search. So I'm going to search for chicken and see what comes up, and hopefully we get results. So we did find a chicken. Let's search again, and this time I'm going to search for frogs and no frogs. So if you want to create more jokes and test out the search app, I think it'll work. So that brings us to the end of searching, which was a kind of a more advanced topic. Now we're going to work with login and registration, and then we will assign each joke an owner. Hey, let's do another feature for this application. So you can see that I have a few more jokes in my database. What I'd like to do now is to hide this column here. So joke answer is given in column 2, and to me that gives the item away. So we need to have the user click on the details to see the joke punchline. So this part of the tutorial will teach you a bit about the razor syntax in building these views. So the view that I'm looking for is the one that shows all of the jokes. So I'm going into the jokes folder, and the index page is the one I want. Now let's diagnose how this page is built and learn about the details. So at the very first line of a view, you get something called a model. Normally that's what you see. And what is this model? It says here we have the class called joke. So we know that this page deals with jokes. However, there's one more thing. It has an item on the outside that says IEnumerable. Or in other words, it's a list. So we have a list of jokes. So this here tells me what the page is all about. Now when we come down into the code, you're going to see items that say things like model. And you're going to have another property there called joke answer. So what we're trying to do is just get rid of the joke answer. So you can see that the HTML code is in the format of a table. So the table header includes the joke answer. Well, I'm going to take that headline out. So TH stands for table head, and then the content inside is now deleted. So also down in the for each section. So this is what generates each row in the table. And it says here we're going to have a joke answer. Let's take that out. And he's gone. And then the last part shows the edit, details, and delete. So let's see if that affects any changes to our screen. Okay, so let's take a look here at the jokes page, and you can see pretty quick here that we have just the joke question. So now if I want to know the answer to any one of these things, I have to click on the details, and then I have the full joke answer on this page. So it's a design decision. If you like your app to work that way, that's how you modify it. So a good way then to learn how this code is supposed to work, you look at the models that are generated by the computer, and you can see all of the different codes and classes and all the HTML that's all done already for you. So that's a pretty quick feature that we've just added. We hid one of the columns in our table. Hey, let's add another feature to this application. You can see that I have the list of all the jokes on here. When I click Create New, I have now an option that says you have to log in. Actually, it's a requirement, not really an option. So how do we do that? Well, let's see in just a second. Well, this is going to be incredibly easy. You'll see that this is just one line of code, really. So I'm looking for the jokes controller, and I'm going for the action called create. So let's go down and find create. It looks to me like about line 61 is where it's at. So create says simply show me the view, create. Well, we don't even want to show that part until they've been logged in. So we're going to put in a decorator or one of these indicators in square brackets. And the word that we're looking for is authorize. Now, there is no type ahead command here. It doesn't recognize authorize. So I'm just going to click away from it. And now I have a red line error. It says authorize attribute is not recognized. We have potential fixes available. And it says I will recommend that you import this library called ASP.NET Core authorization. Let's try that. So the line should go back. It's clear now. Now what happened? What did we change? Well, up at the top of the screen, we've just imported this line on line 10. So it says we're going to use this library. Is that all there is to it? I think there is. Let's run it. Okay, we got the app up and running. Let's go ahead and choose our jokes, and we should get the list of everybody. I'll try creating a new one now, and there it is. So now the login screen says it's pointed to me because, as you can see up here, the registration and login links are there. I have not logged in yet. So I've already registered an account here under email, so I'll put in shad@jokes@app.com. That's what I registered earlier. And the password I think I put in probably was just password1, something like that. And let's go ahead and log in. So now the login is there, and we have a registration or create page. So up at the top, you can say, hello, I see your name is here, and you can now create a new joke question if you want, and then go back to the list. So if I choose create new, go straight to the create. Let's go back to the list. Let's log out, and now let's go back and try to create another one, and it says nobody gets to create a joke unless you've already logged in. So that is a security, so the page can't be seen by unauthorized users. So this line here, line 62, was just a notation that says we're not going to do any creating form unless you've been logged in. Now, the form itself has obviously security, but the process post is following it. So we need to also put authorization here because this is going to actually put the data in the database. This is actually more important for the security than the entry form. So this method here, create, is going to be called whenever there's a new joke to be entered. All right, what else is there? Let's go down to the edit form. I think we don't want to let anyone edit a joke unless they've been authorized. Is there any more? So here is another one that is the processing function for a edit method. Let's go and add authorized there. It looks to me like delete is a good candidate for authorization, so we will take that one. And then there is a delete confirmed. I think that probably sounds like one. And then the rest one, nothing else. Okay, so that looks to me like authorization is now in place. Hey, let's add another feature to our app. Let's talk about CSS and how you can style your page. So looking in the Solution Explorer, I go find this folder called www.root and expand it. And you can see that there are HTML things here. So we have a CSS folder that has the word site. We have a JavaScript folder, which is also site. These two files are where you can customize your website. Now in the library folder, you can see that there are already things that are built in here. So Bootstrap by default is the styling system that we're using that requires jQuery as well. And so let's go look at site CSS and see what it looks like. So you can see that there's a few CSS styling commands. Let's pick one of them just to illustrate that it actually works. I'm going to scroll down until I come to body. Let's just change that to a different color. So let's try background color as an option. And then I'm going to pick something that is just a light gray. So how about a triple E? And I'll save that and run it. Okay, so I got it up and running, and it looks like I have a light gray background that I didn't have before. Now, if you don't see that change, it's because your browser has a style cached in there. So if you press your Shift key and then load again, it will force the web browser or the web server to regenerate the page. It'll get the copy from the server without using the cache. And so if you didn't see the change, that should affect it. Okay, so you can see that we have a CSS styling change. Now, CSS is a whole subject of its own, so this is just a crash course on ASP.NET Core. But if you were to go and modify things, you do not go in to modify the Bootstrap CSS. That is all predefined for you. What they want you to do is to just work with the site CSS file, which will override any of the default Bootstrap settings. The same thing goes with the JavaScript. You can program any page you want using the JS file here and write your custom code. So those are your web development front-end areas that you're going to work on. So go for it if you know all that stuff already. So there's another feature that I would like to show you, but I'm afraid we won't have time to implement. You can see that I have added the user column to the joke question. So you can see who the author was for these great jokes. However, I think that's going to be best left for a more advanced video. This is pretty much a crash course on how to build a very simple application, and we've certainly done that. So we've created a custom nav bar, we've created a table, we've created classes, we've created a search function, we've integrated security, we've done some CSS work. There's a lot of things that we've built here. Custom controllers, views, and models. So all of these things are what jobs are about these days. You're going to see interviews where this kind of technology is a popular subject. Just go ahead on Indeed.com and check to see how many people are working with ASP.NET or .CoreNet. Those are the key terms that you're looking for. Great jobs. Now, many of my students that have graduated with me have already gone on and done some jobs with this kind of development experience. So it's a great study, and congratulations for reaching the end of this crash course. My name is Shad Sluiter, and I hope to see you again in the future.